Hello and thank you for joining us on Newsweek, where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines recently. I am Jacinta Agochukwu. This week, Supreme Court delivers judgment in 5 state governorship disputes. Also this week, Wike summons emergency meeting over worsening insecurity in FCT. And later on the show, Governor Makinde blames Abiodun explosion on illegal miners as death toll rises to 5. All the details in a moment. Stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us. This week, the Supreme Court affirmed the election of Nasir Idris of the All Progressive Congress as the governor of Kebbi State. A 5-member panel of the Apex Court, in a unanimous judgment on Friday, dismissed the appeal called by Bande Aminu, who was the candidate of the PDP in the last governorship election in the state. In other verdicts, the Apex Court affirmed the election of Mohammed Noah Yahaya of Gombe State, Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State, Sheriff Oberewori of Delta State, Dapo Abiodun of Ogun State. This is coming a week after the court ruled on the governorship election tussle in 9 states, including Kano and Plateau, whose governors Abba Kabir Yusuf and Caleb Mutfwang were earlier sacked by the Court of Appeal. I have joining me to discuss this Justice Ojeno, a lawyer and lead partner, Eco Solicitors and Advocates. Good evening and welcome to the show.
It's always my pleasure to join you.
All right, you know, we were here last week, still on this matter. Here we are, and I guess we are yet to see the end of this matter as far as the election petitions are concerned. So let me have your view. How would you compare this ruling by the Supreme Court on Friday, to that of last week in 8 states, right? Is there any unexpected outcomes? Did you see any unexpected outcome in the ruling?
Okay, for me, it was just all plain, all simple. All the outcomes were practically expected. It was not exactly like what happened last week when our nerves were not calmed at all.
Yeah.
Even though there was pockets of protests with respect to the Nasarawa decision. But again, generally, it was exactly or almost exactly what we expected. And I'm very, very happy that gradually the docket of the Supreme Court is being emptied of the political cases, which have greatly and without disproportionately making the Supreme Court too busy to be able to handle what I consider more important things.
Speaking of having the court to be too busy, and one of the causes, if you ask me, is the issue of frivolous cases. Let's talk about this. I don't know, you're a lawyer, and I remember asking you this last week. Is there a way we can put a stop to frivolous petitions in the court and sanction the lawyers? The court now, the parties, the politicians, is there not a way, to put a stop and, have a less busy court cases and all of that?
Okay, for me, particularly, even the Supreme Court, let's look at how busy their dockets are. There are more than 8,000 cases now in the Supreme Court, and the way they work in panels. So now, thank God that the Supreme Court has its full complement of 21 justices. But again, when you say 21 justices, it doesn't mean they are all working 21 separate cases at a time. Most times they sit in panels of either 5 or 7. So the maximum they can be per time is 4 to handle cases. So, and we have more than 8,000. And to be able to exhaust one case, one docket, is very, very much hard work. So because of that, their work is very heavily cut out for them. But as per how to decongest the courts, and you have to tell politicians not to fight to finish, that's going to be very, very difficult. It's only on very few occasions that we have seen it at the presidential level in this country. In fact, given how old I am, I see just one, which was when President Jonathan said he is not going to fight President Buhari in 2015. That being the exception, it has always been the rule that whenever politicians indulge in political contests, they feel that the journey doesn't end when the umpire says it is a particular party is the winner. They feel that they must litigate it to the hilt. But I'm also happy that in Kogi State too, it looks like with the last election, the gladiators, they actually said that they are not going to contest against the person who is the present governor-elect. I pray that that is more the case. But again, in order for this to also be guaranteed, the umpire too must be seen to be above board in all circumstances. I think that may encourage a few of the politicians not to want to go the entire route. But otherwise, I see Nigerian politicians slugging it out completely. But and also, as for the members of my constituency, lawyers,
exactly,
they will still tell their clients to test it because miracles happen. Miracles happen.
So, you mentioned how difficult this can be, but just help make sense of this. How can let's talk about reforming of our judicial system generally. What are the challenges and the opportunity? Are there opportunities, to arrange this, to make it more, is it practicable now, or what should I use? How do we reform our judicial system?
Okay, one thing that I will miss a bit to also repeat is not all matters should end up at the Supreme Court. Matters should terminate at the Court of Appeal. We currently have a system in this country where every matter that originates from every remote part of this country has the potential of ending up at the Supreme Court, except for, of course, legislative matters that we see that end up at the Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court should have the power to be able to say, okay, on grounds of national policy, this matter, as has been decided by the Court of Appeal, we want to exercise our discretion to use our more experienced and wiser apparatus or experience to be able to check and decide on it, and to either affirm whatever it is that the Court of Appeal has decided or to upturn it, as we have seen in deserving cases. So once this, as a chief means, is put in place, I feel that the docket of the Supreme Court will be extremely decongested, and maybe the litigation industry will even also be a cash cow as it is in the United States. I'm also not just bringing this idea from my head. It is something that the United States of America in particular is currently enjoying. They have just 9 justices and they have more than 300 million people as population, and they are extremely litigious. Pour coffee, they sue. You sneeze, they sue. You place a barrier where you're not supposed to place, they sue. Yet they don't have donkey years. They don't have a situation where matters are practically concluded by grandchildren or great-grandchildren of litigants in Nigeria potentially at the Supreme Court. So I feel that if that is done as a chief way, of course, the Supreme Court has also taking the opportunity to chastise lawyers when they bring frivolous actions. But that is not generally the case, because a lawyer must earn his fees. He must earn his fees. He must do the work. If a politician or anybody says, there's this in court, he must do the work. So it is for the judiciary to now say, I've heard your argument, I've heard the argument of the other lawyer. I feel that his argument holds more water and is more in accordance with the law, and I will rule in favor of that lawyer. But that a lawyer should not advise a client, or a lawyer should not contest a matter in court. Maybe that will be the end of democracy.
Really. Anyway, I for one, and I'm sure I'm speaking for so many Nigerians, are looking forward to the day elections. Nigerian election will not end in court. We are looking forward to that day.
It's my greatest prayer.
Is it possible?
It's my greatest prayer.
Is it possible?
Maybe that would be in heaven, Uhuru or El Dorado, but it should be greatly reduced.
All right. Let's take a short break. Our news continues in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back, and if you're just tuning in, it's Newsweek where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines recently. Now, Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nelson Wike, has convened an emergency security meeting in response to the escalating security challenges in the nation's capital. The meeting, which held on Tuesday, was attended by heads of security agencies, top officials of the FCT administration, council chairmen, and traditional rulers. The minister urged the stakeholders to work together to restore peace and order in the FCT and assured the residents of improved security. He also expressed his condolences to the families of the victims of the kidnappings and banditry in the FCT. The security situation in the FCT has worsened recently, with gunmen invading communities, forcefully entering people's homes and abducting residents from their residence. I have joining me to discuss this Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. Olufemi, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Jessica.
Good evening. It's good to see you. Now, let's make sense of what's happening in Abuja. How do you perceive the increasing insecurity in the capital city of Nigeria? Do you think it reflects badly on our country and as well in security?
Well, beyond whatever reflection this portends, it is frightening, especially for those who have lived in Abuja or who have been visiting Abuja. For somebody like me, for over 20 years, I've consistently visited Abuja. And I can tell you that there is no time in the history of Abuja that you have ever felt unsafe. I mean, if you have a meeting in Abuja today, you are more likely to leave your meeting point to your hotel, unlike the usual persons coming from Kano, Lagos, Calabar, to Abuja. After your meeting, you want to experience the Nigerian restaurants, you want to experience the gardens, you want to visit friends, if possible, in Abuja. That has been the tradition. But today, the average person in Abuja is looking for the next opportunity to be indoors after whatever engagement, either business or whatever you are having in Abuja. It's at a frightening level. It is unprecedented. And that is why not only the government is concerned, the average Nigerian who have businesses in Abuja or have reason to be in Abuja should be concerned about the situation in Abuja today. There have been incidences of violence, kidnap and all sort of things in Abuja in the past. But it has never happened at such proximity that it is happening today. In the past, we could hear stories of Abuja, Kaduna Way, some remote parts of Abuja, some parts along Abuja, Lokoja Highway, and of course within the Federal Capital Territory. But today, I can tell you that in places that are just about 10-15 minutes drive to the city center, people are being abducted. In actual fact, one of my very close friends from Osun State has a sister abducted for 6 weeks, somewhere around Maitama. One of the, and of course, the most expensive eyebrow area in Nigeria today, just about some weeks ago. So it's frightening. And I think that is why, the whole noise is everywhere about the situation in Abuja.
Let's talk about the means or strategy at which we have at hand to combat this insecurity. Do you think there is a need to, to change the strategy? Some are advocating involving and empowering a civilian joint task force. Is it the high time?
You see, every time we talk about civilian joint task force, like we had in Borno, some part of the south and northeast, the eventual creation of Amotekuni, and is a direct indictment on the Nigerian state about the failure of government, whose primary responsibility is the security and welfare of the citizens, to protect the citizens. In the first place, you have no business harming civilians with AK-47 pump actions to protect themselves if government is able to live up to the expectation of its primary responsibility. The primary duty of government is not to build roads and hospitals. It is the security and welfare of the citizens. So rather than advocating for another civilian JTF or another Abuja version of Amotekun and all this kind of security system, where
I think we must begin to call out the government on the need to live up to its primary responsibility, which is the security and welfare. In fact, welfare comes next to security, because you can only demand for a welfare situation from the government when you are secured. For people who are, kidnapped, who are in, captivity, there's nothing about their welfare. We heard stories of a band of musicians on their way to Abuja who were kidnapped some couple of weeks ago. And you heard that stories about how they had to feed on grasses and all sort of, funny things. So is somebody feeding on grass, thinking about his welfare? So first, it's because he became insecure. So security must be prioritized. And I must say this, that I haven't been in Abuja for some weeks and I haven't experienced some of the situations in Abuja. I want to say that we must, at least compared to the past, commend the disposition of the federal government, particularly the president, to addressing this issue. Because I was in Abuja in the previous time when situations like this were emerging. But for God's sake, in the last couple of days, you could see the radical approach to tackling this issue, but more has to be done.
Okay, you don't agree that we need extra...
We don't need it. The state must leave us to the responsibility.
What do you say about the self-preservation techniques some experts are also prescribing, such as awareness, anticipation, as well, mitigation? I don't know if you buy that as well.
Whatever awareness, mitigation, or whatever approach has to do with national orientation, citizens' education, which should not include encouraging citizens to protect themselves by bearing arms. Moving forward, you could tell citizens to be conscious of their environment. Those should be national orientation, responsibilities and the like. But the job of protecting citizens, the job of securing the society, which is the primary responsibility of state, should be in the hand of the government.
All right. Let's go to our final story for tonight. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde says the explosion that recently rocked Ibadan metropolis was as a result of activities of illegal miners occupying one of the buildings in the Bodija area of the capital. The blast impact extends beyond physical damage. Residents recount harrowing tales of near-death experiences, grappling with the aftermath shock and the emotional trauma. Governor Makinde has acknowledged their plight, offering condolences to the bereaved and promising continued support for all the affected. More bodies have been recovered from the site, with some report putting the death toll at 5. As you have Olufemi Lawson, Director Center for Public Accountability, and Justice Ojeda, lawyer and lead partner, eco-solicitor and advocate. I want to bring you to this final discussion. Let me begin with you. Why we still have issue with this exposure and misuse of commercial explosive. I don't know if you remember the House of Rep calling for a stop in giving licenses to, importing this explosive. Why do you think we are still here? Why do you think we are still having these cases?
Okay, for me, I think it's actually failure of state, failure of security. That is why we are here. And thank God that we are not even in this situation that Lebanon, for example, has found itself, because the Lebanese, I think they had a similar explosion, even though it's on a larger scale about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and their economy till now has tanked just because of a similar explosion of or indiscriminate storage of things like this. So if this is happening, it shows that the operatives, the agencies of government, the police and all, they are not doing a yeoman's job with respect to this. I don't also want to believe that this is an isolated case of storage. This should be a wake-up call for them to actually be on the lookout and on the hunt for persons or organizations who are in the mining business, whom they have not been vigilant to observe the way they move or store these things, and for them to quickly trace them and ensure that they work by the books. Because if that is not done, this won't be the only instance, and we pray that we don't have worse cases.
Let me still stay with you. You're a lawyer, and I guess what you're talking about is more like regulatory measures. Do you think we have it, like we are doing the right thing? Are we regulating enough of these explosive devices?
Definitely, definitely. The laws are in place to prevent this kind of storage indiscriminately within residential areas of whatever amount of explosives. So it is not even little storage of little quantity is not actually permissible. That it was even stored to this extent and to cause this kind of gargantuan kind of damage is a total breach of the law, total breach of regulations, and it's a grand show that maybe some people that are supposed to be enforcing are looking the other way, maybe because don't let's speculate now as to probable reasons, but this should be a wake-up call for them to retrace their steps and ensure that whatever laxity that resulted in this kind of scenario does not repeat itself.
Femi, let me come to you. I want to believe that there should be a standard provision for storage of these devices. But why residential areas? Why should we even see this in residential areas?
To be factual, we have more of these devices stored in residential areas in Ogun State, in Bodija Ibadan, Birnin Kebbi, Lafia, Nasarawa, Kefi, or wherever. Do you know why? I will continue to have this if we don't take the shortcut to preventing this. A miner comes from Senegal or Mali to exploit, maybe gemstone or whatever precious stone in Igbeti in Oyo State. He goes to Abuja to obtain license for mineral resources deposited in Okeogun, area of Oyo State. It takes the authority from Abuja, comes to Lagos with that authority, ships in explosives, stores it in Ibadan because its site is in Oyo State, or takes it to Lafia because the site is in Nasarawa State, haven't taken authority from Abuja. Therefore, the government of Oyo State, government of Nasarawa, or wherever the site is located, has no supervisory role, has no authority, has no even knowledge of whatever is happening within their vicinity, because the authority to authorize mining activities is given by a minister in Abuja, whose business is to give approval and get the necessary revenue, while the resources are explored in a state some hundreds of kilometers away from where. So you will continue. As I speak to you, there are a lot of places where explosive devices are stored. And, Governor of Oyo State defined them as illegal miners, but I don't want to absolutely agree with the governor that they're illegal miners, because if you go deep further, you realize that these are people who have licenses from Abuja to mine resources in this state. What is the shortcut to this? Let the states monitor, supervise, and control whatever is mined in their backyard, in their vicinity, and pay the necessary due to Abuja. We cannot sit in Abuja and regulate resources in Kefi, in Kebbi, in Guso, in Oyo, Igbeti, or in fact, there are mining activities along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And there are miners who use these explosive devices legitimately for their job. But the state cannot supervise. In fact, agencies of the state cannot go to this mining site to enforce environmental laws. You saw what happened in Enugu some couple of weeks ago, where miners resisted the attempt by the Enugu State Government Environmental Agency to enforce standard because they have authority from Abuja. So we must look at curbing this situation by, taking the approach that will legitimately address it. Until we do that, I can tell you there are more houses housing these devices, and no regulation from Abuja can curb it.
All right, but finally, before we go, how do you rate the response and the rescue efforts by the government and other agencies after the explosion? How would you rate it?
Very fantastic. You must commend Nigerian citizens, the power of the social media, because the moment that incident happened, a lot of Nigerian health workers, volunteers were mobilized through the social media. And you must also give it to the Oyo State government that minutes after that incident happened, health workers, emergency workers were mobilized to the site So it's encouraging, and we must commend Nigerians and commend the Oyo State government for the response, and that has limited the number of casualties, recorded in that incident.
Yeah. You have a final take quickly?
Okay, for me, I love what Mr. Lawson actually said with respect to enforcement by states. I feel that there are extant state laws. I've been in situations where I know that the states, in mining situations where I know that the states actually use the extant state laws to prosecute illegal miners or even legal miners that got their licenses from Abuja, and I saw them win in such situations. I've seen the Lagos State government environmental team in action that defeated the technicality of the lease from Abuja. And I feel that the states too can explore that. But again, we must amend Section 43 and 44 of our Constitution that makes mining or natural resources something that we have to go cap in hand from at state level to go and perpetually beg the federal government for some of the federal government power when it comes to revenue generation or earnings should be devolved to the state. And mining is one of such ones if we want efficiency and safety of citizens.
Thankfully, the president has set up a panel to look into the actual cause of this whole thing, and hopefully someone will be held accountable for this thing. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Thank you, Mr. Olufemi Lawson. I'll be speaking with Mr. Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability and Justice, Ojeno lawyer and lead eco-solicitors and advocate. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the show.
Great pleasure.
And as well, thank you for being part of the show. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms at TVC News NGO or on our website at tvcnews.tv. I am Jacinta Agochukwu. Until next week, it's goodbye.